All right, everyone. Welcome to Musical Mornings with Miss Andrew from Rock Island Sound. Now, the thing about live video sometimes is that sometimes things go wrong, so we're going to try it again. Facebook seemed to have some technical glitches going on, so we'll see if it works this time. So today what we're going to learn about is we're going to learn about a composer named Johann Sebastian Bach. And we're going to learn about how he was important to the violin. We're going to learn a little bit about his life, and we're going to learn about some of his compositions or his music. So first I'm going to play for you a selection from his work. And while I'm playing that, I want you to think about two things. First, if you're watching in the comments, tell me how old you are. And second, if you've heard of this piece before, you can tell me what it is in the comments. Okay, so does anybody know what that piece is? I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it. So while you're thinking about that, talk a little bit about who is Johann Sebastian Bach. Also, we know him as J.S. Bach, just by his initials. So Johann Sebastian Bach was born in the year 1685, and he died in the year 1750. And this is a picture of Johann Sebastian Bach. Now think about the time. Let's think about the time period that he lived in. So the United States declared its independence in 1776. So just 26 years after Bach died. So this is a little bit before what we think is like the colonial times. So in Europe, when someone wanted to compose music, they had to either be part of a church, with part of the religious organizations, or they had to be in the employ of a prince or a king or some other member of the royal families in Europe in order to get a job. They just couldn't compose music and publish it on their own. They had to have, we call that a patron, somebody who supports them with money and references, telling them, hey, this Johann Sebastian Bach, he's written a lot of music for me. He can write a lot of music for you as well. Now, Johann Sebastian Bach, he played a little bit of violin, but his main instrument was the organ. And he wrote a lot of music for the organ, which is a keyboard instrument that uses wind and it goes through the pipes. And this is a picture of him playing the organ. And one story about Bach was that he wanted to see this famous organist and composer named Buxtehude. And he was, at the time, very famous organist. And Bach was probably about 18 years old at this time. He had just finished his schooling, looking to go out into the world and prove that he was a musician. But he wanted to hear this organist play. Now, the only thing is that this organist was a long way away, about 450 kilometers, about 200 miles. So think about 200 miles is about the distance from New York to Portland, Maine. So think about, now, back in those days, they didn't have cars, they didn't have planes or trains. They had, you might have had a horseback, but a lot that was usually reserved for the wealthy, horse carriage. So most people had to walk. So Bach walked all the way to this town 200 miles away to see this one organist play. He was so inspired. And then he walked all the way back after the performance. That's dedication And that is showing that you're really passionate about something to want to learn. So think about the next time that you're passionate about something. How far can you go? How far are you willing to go? All right. Now, he also came from a family of composers. And then when he had children, his sons grew up to be composers as well. So some of his sons are Johann Christian Bach and Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. And they wrote music a little bit later. And some of their music is not as famous as their fathers, but still very well worth looking into. Now, he worked as an organist and composer in 3 different cities in Germany. So he was in Europe, and so he was in 3 different cities. And his most famous one was when he was in the city of Leipzig, where he was a church director, and he wrote lots of music for church. And the song that I played was called, it's known here in U.S. as Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring. It's actually from one of his pieces for church, a cantata, which is for singers and orchestra. And so we hear that piece is heard a lot now. So now, why do violinists study Bach? Well, he wrote a lot of music for the violin in different forms. And one of the ways he wrote is called a concerto. Now, last week, we just talked a little bit about concertos and how they're pieces with solos that are played with an orchestra, where a soloist is up in front of an orchestra, and they are usually the person who is focused on it. So Bach wrote 2 concertos for violin that are for just one violin. And I'm going to play a little bit of an excerpt from that. It's from his A minor violin concerto. So I'll just play a little bit for you so you can hear what it sounds like. So you can see how there's a lot of difficult passages for the violin, and fingers have to move fast, lots of string crossings. So concertos are also designed to show off a soloist. So a lot of composers would write concertos for specific violinists, and they would highlight things that the violinists would do very well. Now, the other concerto I'm going to play for you a little bit is actually, it's a concerto for 2 violins. So this is called the double concerto, and he wrote it for 2 violins and orchestra. And I can only play one part right now. But just to give you an idea of some of the style of Bach. So one of the things you notice is there's a lot of back and forth between. There's a and then another answer. So Bach was a very prolific composer in something called a fugue, where you have one subject and then you take that subject and then you play it off of each other, and then they play together, and the combinations sound really complex and rich. And so you take one little melody and just put it all together. It's really cool. It's really hard to do. He wrote some fugues for solo violin, but they're really difficult. So now, the other concerto that I'm going to play for you is called the Brandenburg Concerto. It's his third Brandenburg Concerto. Now, these are a little different from the solo concertos. They're called concertos, but they're actually for different groups of instruments. So this concerto is for 3 violins, 3 violas, remember, we talked about viola last week, and 3 cellos. So, I'm going to just play a little bit. You've probably heard this piece before as well. Just another example. All right. Before we go today, I'm going to talk to you about a couple of important pieces that Bach wrote for violin. And these are for solo violin. So they're called the sonatas and partitas. So first, let's see. Well, first we have a question. How old was Bach when he started playing? Well, he was about 10 when he started studying the organ. And so he studied that through his youth from his father. And then he did learn other instruments as he went along, the violin and the harpsichord. But his main instrument was the organ. So he played the violin just so he could learn how to compose for it. So he wasn't a virtuoso on it. He was, again, a virtuoso more on the organ. But great question. So the sonatas and partitas. So what's a sonata? A sonata, it's a form of music, and in its definition has changed over time. So we're going to talk about it how it is in Bach's time. So a sonata has 4 different movements, 4 different parts. And in Bach's time, you usually start off something slow. Then we would have a fast movement. Then another slow movement. And then end with a fast movement. So, that's what a sonata is. He wrote 3 of those for solo violin. And it involves a lot of playing 2, 3, and sometimes even 4 notes at a time. So when we play 2 notes at a time, we call it a double stop. When we play 3 notes, triple stop, and a 4 note, it's a quadruple stop. And in Bach's time, this is important to talk about too. So my bow is a modern bow. In Bach's time, the bow would actually curve, instead of curving like this, it would actually curve like this. So what that would allow, and the violins were a little bit, the bridge here, this wooden pot, would be a little bit flatter. So you could play on all 4 strings without having to break the bow apart. You could actually play all 4 strings there. Now if I do it there, the sound is not as good. So there's a big movement in playing Bach on historically accurate instruments. But we can also play on modern, we just have to adjust a little bit. Now, what a partita is a piece that has different dances in it. So the piece that I'm going to play is the third partita, and I'm just going to go through a little bit of some of it, and I'm going to play the whole jig, which is the last one. So first, they usually have like a little prelude. So that one has a lot of string crossings in it. Then, a dance called the Lore. So all these dances were danced in a royal court. So they would have these balls, and they would dance these different dances. So and some of them were slow, and some were fast. So a Lore is kind of slow. It has a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Then there's a gavotte. This one's in 2, so yum, bum, 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 1 and 2 and. Then the next dance is a minuet, which is a dance in 3. Yum, bum, 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 bum. Then Bourrée, another fast dancing tune. And then the last one, which I'm going to play all the way through for you, is called a jig. Now, we probably know jigs from Irish music, da-dee, da-da, but it actually also, when it came from when people visited Ireland and then they went back to Europe, they brought this dance with them. So to conclude our musical Mondays today, I'm going to play the whole jig from Bach's 3rd Partita for solo violin. So I hope you've enjoyed this journey through some of Johann Sebastian Bach's music and how it relates to the violin. And I encourage you to go on YouTube and find some more compositions by Johann Sebastian Bach. He wrote a lot, and not just for violin. He wrote for orchestras. He wrote for big choirs and with orchestras. He wrote lots of pieces for organ. So I encourage you to Google some of those and find them on YouTube. All right, so thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks for bearing with some of our technical difficulties today. And join me next week at 9:30. Next week we're going to learn about Vivaldi and tone painting. So we're going to talk about what that is next time. Tomorrow we're going to learn some more about singing from Rachel, so don't forget to tune in at 9:30 tomorrow. And all week long to learn about the different instruments. And again, I teach violin lessons at Rock Island Sound. I'm also running a fiddle camp this summer. So if you're interested in taking lessons, please call Rock Island Sound or visit their website. The number is 914-967-0800, or you can look on their website and sign up there. All right, everyone. I'll see you next Monday at 9:30. Have a great day and have a great week. Bye-bye.